Tana, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Mario.
Tana, can you hear me?
All good. Thanks, Mario.
That's it.
Recording in progress.
The House Chairperson.
There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. You may be seated. Honorable members, the only item on today's order paper is questions addressed to ministers in Cluster 4 Economics. There are 4 supplementary questions on each question. Parties have given an indication of which question their members wish to pose a supplementary question. Adequate notice was given to parties for this purpose. This was done to facilitate participation of members who are connecting to the sitting through the virtual platform. The members who will pose supplementary questions will be recognized by the presiding officer. In allocating opportunities for supplementary questions, the principle of fairness, among others, has been applied. If a member who is supposed to ask a supplementary question through the virtual platform is unable to do so due to technological difficulties, the party whip on duty will be allowed to ask the question on behalf of their member. When all supplementary questions have been answered by the executive, we will proceed to the next question on the question paper. Before I proceed, all the ministers are in the house except for the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, who has asked permission to present from the virtual platform. Honorable members, the first question today okay. The first question today is the question asked by, I don't have that here. Why don't we have it? Okay, should I use this? Don't worry. Asked by the Honorable Millem. I'm not sure if I call it correctly. Natasha wants to kill me. Honorable Natasha wants to kill me. Milem. Okay, thank you for protecting that. Asked by Honorable Milem to the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. Previously, when we did this, because of these microphones and some of the files that the ministers are using in responding and writing, I had asked ministers to take the podium during your 4 questions, and then the next one will come, and then there is a seat here. As we proceed, you are able to sit and listen to the question, because sometimes you are not audible as you hold your file on your seat. So will we invite Minister Mantashe to take the podium as he responds to question 193 asked by the Honorable Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members in the House. The question of cost of energy per hour in terms of International Energy Agency, cost is projected at, in terms of the 2020 edition. The levelized cost of electricity of nuclear projects ranges from 27.41 US dollar megawatt per hour to 61.16 US megawatts per hour. That means it ranges from 49 cents to R1.10 in South African terms. At a 3% discount rate. These are 2020 figures, assuming the rand-dollar exchange of 18 rand per dollar as at that time. So if that exchange rate fluctuates, the price will fluctuate in terms of the exchange. So the actual cost of South African nuclear new build program will be an outcome of competitive bidding process in line with the value for money principles. The reason that for any project of this nature, we issue requests for proposal is because we don't want to assume and set prices, we want to test the market, and the market should respond to that question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Milem.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Chairperson, you can pronounce it like Malema, but without the A on the end. And I'm much friendlier. Minister, we've had 17 years of load shedding.
When I mayhem, we must wait, man.
Honorable Mautwe, we don't do that. Please, don't repeat that. You'll be removed from the platform. Thank you. Proceed, Honorable Milem.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair,
Okay,
we've had...
House Chair, can we call a point of order then?
Honorable Ndlozi, you have a a gadget with you and your hand is not up, what you are doing is the same thing that I'm talking to. Please don't do
Oh,
that. You can
okay,
raise your hand. And
I've
I'm not,
risen it. I've risen it.
okay, what is your point of order?
The implication of the speaker, and I thought as the chairperson, you would protect honorable members so that we don't have to call unnecessary point of orders. The implication of the speaker is that the honorable Malema is not a friendly person. And that is completely out of order. When we call him mayhem, I'm sure that he will not be appreciating that. So you must call him to order. Everybody in the house is honorable. End of
Okay,
story. Thank you.
thank you. No, I hear you. Don't do that again,
Okay,
Honorable
House Chair.
Madam. Proceed.
I won't do that, Chair. I'm friendly. What can I say?
Okay, proceed.
Minister, we've had 17 years of load shedding, which have severely constrained South Africa's economy. Various reports and analyses have indicated that we need new generation capacity now, not in 10 years' time, that we need new transmission infrastructure, and that the latest cost estimate for that is more than 390 billion rand, more than double what it was in December 2022. We all know that the Medupi and Kusile project ran years over schedule and multiple billions of rands over budget because of corruption and mismanagement by the ANC. Do we honestly expect an ANC government to do better with a nuclear new build? Minister, my question is this. Would you agree that a nuclear new build is a long-term project that will not solve load shedding in under 10 years, and that the costs associated with nuclear, including the incremental transmission infrastructure that will be required for the offtake of nuclear power, do not make it the best option for alleviating South Africa's immediate electricity crisis, especially under an ANC government?
Thank you. The Honorable the Minister.
I don't know the under an ANC government part. My assumption is that any problem is a problem of the country who must resolve it. And as a shadow minister of the DA, you are not a spectator, you are a participant. That's my assumption, unless you see yourself as just an opponent. I see you as a participant. Now, 17 years of load shedding. One of the things that you force us to do every time we talk about it is to accept that building of Medupi and Kusile and Ingula were delayed because when it was declared that the oversupply of electricity was going to be exhausted by 2007, everybody banked on the private sector to invest on electricity generation, delayed the project and started these projects much later, at a rush, and a number of mistakes happened, including design problems. And if you deny that, you will be actually fishing for problems. Following that, Medupi and Kusile, I had the tail end. I'm sure Minister Ramkhupa will answer this question and complete it. I'm just putting an introduction to it. The reality of the matter is that we have authorized a number of renewables over the period, a number of them. And to me, I can tell you that confidently today, renewables on their own are not going to resolve load shedding because of the intermittent nature of them. They need a partner with base load. Therefore, coal, nuclear, and gas are appropriate partners if we're going to resolve load shedding and energy security in the country.
Thank you. The next follow-up question will be asked by the Honorable Mahlaule.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Minister, in what ways does the nuclear new build program minimize the financial stability risks to ensure that IPPs in nuclear make reasonable returns on their investment? And what are some of the factors that make it difficult to procure nuclear energy from IPPs at a price that does not exceed the ESCOM standard tariffs?
Thank you. The Minister.
If I answer that question in the definite, I will be doing thumb sucking. That's why I referred you to something called request for proposal. Once we issue the request for proposal, then we'll have tested the market. Once we have tested the market, we'll know the appetite of the market for nuclear build program. Only then can we answer your question completely, because the reality of the matter is that at this point in time, my experience is that nuclear is the most efficient generator and cost-effective generator of energy today. If you look at Quebec, it is the most cost-effective and the most efficient. It is a little bit stiff at commissioning and at decommissioning. But when it is operational, the costs are low. It gives us the lowest cost of electricity. For example, I can tell you that it gives us just over 40 cents per unit, when actually our renewables, bid window 1 give us about 6 rand per unit, bid window 2 about 3 rand per unit, bid window 3 give us 2 rand per unit, and the more reasonable, which is 110 of bid window 4. Bid window 5 went low down. Many of those bidders didn't finish and get to financial close, because in an effort to accelerate demand for renewables, they put the price very low. They couldn't reach the financial close. So my suggestion is, as we deal with the energy problems, we must be reasonable, we must do what should be done and not try to exaggerate any aspects of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Mautwe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, given the energy per kilowatt hour and some estimation of cost per kilowatt, which you tried to explain earlier on, which you say you've got the figure as at 2021, now in 2024, just so you can wake up. We can all agree that nuclear program will be amongst the cheapest sources of energy in comparison to other sources. However, Minister, can you also agree that such an addition will be meaningless if we continue to pay the kinds of cost per kilowatts we currently pay for this renewable energy through independent power producers? And I'm asking this, Chair, because in 2019, Minister, you and the Minister of Public Enterprise, who is proceeding with privatization of Eskom for grid, said you are going to renegotiate those rates, and you never came back to us with a report. To this day, you still don't have the figure yourself standing there as you presented earlier on. So what is the cost, and what is the implication of this cost on ordinary people of South Africa?
Thank you. The Honorable the Minister.
Honorable Mautwe is stating truth that does not exist. We never came to this house and promised privatization of Eskom. We never did that. We never did that, and we'll never do that. I can confirm that I will never do that. Even the electricity amendment bill, which talks about establishment of the transmission company, it is emphasizing it is a state-owned company. It is following the Dutch model, which actually is a wheeler and a trader of electricity, and therefore create a market of the multiple sources of electricity generation. So if Honorable Mautwe interprets that as privatization, that is her interpretation. She must not state that as an issue that I said in the House, because that truth does not exist. Engos.
Thokoza Mhlonishwa. Honorable Zondo.
Honorable Chairperson, not available, technical difficulties. Honorable Minister, considering that your department is the designated procuring agency for the nuclear new build program, what safeguards have you put in place to ensure that either the request for proposals which you referred to or the tendering procedure will be fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective? Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members. request for proposal in itself ensures transparency, ensures fairness, it ensures competitiveness because it is an open request for proposal. And various bidders come to the fore and put their proposals, and they are assessed by a panel that will actually assess them. I can assure you that Section 34, which was issued by the Minister of Electricity in terms of the proclamation of the President, I'm giving this to those who take us to court, that proclamation gave the Minister of Electricity the right to issue the Section 34 for nuclear. We will now, because NERSA has concurred with that Section 34, will issue the request for proposal, and that will assess all those criteria. The reason that we issue it is to assess those criteria in a transparent way, rather than take a decision in a corner and give it to some preferred bidder of our liking. Thank you.
Jose, as we allow you to go back to your seat and proceed to the Minister of Finance. I'm not forcing you, Honorable Minister, but I think it's much better for audibility to be here on this podium. Yes. The question that you're going to deal with now is question 201, asked by the Honorable Mani to the Minister of Finance. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, House Chair. The Prudential Authority is afforded certain powers in terms of Section 81 to 84 of the Banks Act of 1990 to control the activities of unregistered persons. These activities are, however, confined to illegal deposit taking only. Following the expiry of Itala as exemption, the Prudential Authority has appointed a repayments administrator to ensure depositor funds are safeguarded. In terms of the provision of Section 1, subsection 1cc of the Banks Act, the Minister is required to concur to the issuance of exemption notice by the Prudential Authority. Mark that. I don't issue exemption, I concur. As such, the Minister does not have the authority to issue exemption notices. The issuance of exemption notice is a regulatory function that is performed by the Prudential Authority as an independent regulatory authority. In this respect, the Minister is not empowered by law to interfere in the operational decisions of independent regulatory bodies. Notwithstanding the above, the National Treasury has been coordinating closely with the Prudential Authority and other relevant regulators to ensure that depositors are safeguarded. Itala functions through the promulgation of the KwaZulu-Natal Itala Development Finance Corporation Act of 2013 under the oversight of the board and reports to the Provincial Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs. The strategy and sustainability of Itala is therefore underlined, directed by the board under the oversight of the KZN provincial government. National Treasury has, however, developed a tied banking system that allows banks like Itala to be fully licensed through other frameworks. I thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Mani.
Thank you, House Chair. I'll take it on.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mani. You may proceed. Honorable Hlonyani wanted to take the question on your behalf, but if you allow, you can proceed.
Minister, noting that Section 12 of the Banks Act requires a company to be either a publicly owned company or state-owned company on condition that it is a national state-owned company for it to be eligible for banking license. Noting that you've already said you haven't got this and that power, but at least you've got a power to amend the Act, would you agree to sponsor an amendment of Section 10 of the Financial Matters Amendment Act so that the word national, that condition of national, is removed from state-owned company definition. This would immediately remove the impediment for Itala Bank to have a banking license, especially given that this is one of our pioneers in banking. It has played a role in financial inclusion and being a financially sound and liquid state-owned company, one of the few with good governance and also with no malfeasance or corruption. So the only word standing between Itala Bank and its eligibility is the word national that is preceding state-owned company. If that act was to be amended to remove the word national, then the provisions of the Financial Matters Act will then allow Itala Bank to be considered a bank that can have its own license. So the question is, once again, would you agree to sponsor an amendment of this Section 10 so that this is realizable? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
There are discussions about amendment of the Banks Act to change that question. I therefore cannot make commitment on behalf of everybody else, but I'm saying there are discussions that are intended to amend the Banks Act in this regard.
Thank you. The Honorable Maswale.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. Minister, given that Itala Bank was established for the purpose of mobilizing and securing resources and provide financial supportive services for the people of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as those in the outlying areas, within the statutory frameworks, you have referred in your earlier response, Minister, to a role National Treasury could play to support efforts to ensure that finally this bank ensures or secures sustainability as well as functioning lawfully within the Banks Act. Would you really share what those other frameworks you referred to could be?
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
The current legislative framework does not allow any province to own a bank. The current legislative framework. Itala has been operating through an exemption for over 20 years. The last exemption was issued in July 2022, which expires on the 15th of December 2023, an 18-month exemption. During this period, Itala was required to do a number of other options. One of those options was to tie with an existing bank and operate on this platform using Itala. Another option which was proposed was to start as a mutual bank, which does not require all the typical regulatory requirements which you have now. A mutual bank only requires 7 members of the mutual bank. The proposition to them was, if you don't have 7 members, you have depositors, which your deposit can be utilized as members of the mutual bank. In that sense, we would not be discussing what we're discussing today. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Sarupen.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, we know that this particular bank has a long and storied history in KwaZulu-Natal of making sure that banking and financial services are available to financially excluded persons. However, most recently, its troubles have been that it has fallen foul of regulators for failing to safeguard clients' insurance premiums and has come under fire from the FSCA for failing to submit financial reports for 2 years. This has all happened since the ANC gained a majority in KwaZulu-Natal, and its policy of cater deployments became the policy of the KwaZulu-Natal government. So my question, Minister, is what were the early warning signs about trouble with the bank? And why did the bank and its management structure not act? And what did they report to the government as the shareholder at all? And why did they fail to act?
Honorable Minister, before you proceed, you are protected by Rule 1427, where you can only respond to one question because the supplementary questions are limited to one question. Proceed.
I'm not aware of any problems in Itala Bank as I stand before you, House Chair, and this House. What I'm aware of has been battles between them and the Prudential Authority over meeting a criteria to get a commercial bank license. That has been the issue, not any mismanagement. I'm not aware of that. The repayment authority, which has been appointed, has appointed Susan Zaluba Koboto to look into not to audit, to look into the total assets of the bank and total liabilities. As things stands, the bank has depositors of about 2.5 billion rand and loans of about 2.1 billion rand. That's all we know. We want to understand the nature of the bank as far as we're concerned, whether these 2.1 billion loans are non-performing and performing, which is standard. Any bank has got performing and non-performing loans. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Inkosi Buthelezi.
Thank you very much, House Chair. I understand that the Minister has made it very clear that the challenges faced by Itala Bank are outside his jurisdiction. Now, I want to understand from him now whether the Minister is satisfied that the reasons not to extend the exemption of Itala does not amount to any deliberate act of trying to undermine the bank, as we have seen that trend in all state-owned entities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honorable the Minister.
I want to assure the honorable member that as we stand here, we have done everything possible to negotiate with both the provincial government and Itala SOC. Let me give you an example. They spend more time in court with the Prudential Authority than in the actual discussions, which is quite a difficult problem. Let me give an example. I had a meeting with the Premier, with some person from Itala, which happens to be a legal person. We agreed that our discussions are off record. By Monday, he's taken our discussion with the Premier and made a supplementary submitted supplementary papers in court using our argument. So what I'm trying to say, one of the proposals I put on the table was that instead of these difficulties, can we convert Itala into a mutual bank? Once all the regulatory things have been sorted out and stabilized, then we can continue to a second phase of a commercial bank. If we have done that over the years, we would have been talking about a commercial license by now. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I allow you to take your seat back and invite the Honorable Minister of Communications, Digital Technologies to respond to question 172 as asked by the Honorable Ndagani.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The SABC is guided by its editorial policy as well as the CASA regulations, which were gazetted 26 February 2024 this year. The regulations state as follows, open quote, each broadcasting service licensee will be expected to treat political parties and independent candidates fairly. Equitable treatment is unlikely to be achieved in a single program, but can be achieved in a series of programs. We also want to make the point that each broadcasting service licenses should be consistent in its treatment of contesting political parties and independent candidates of conflicting views. SABC has therefore committed itself to abide by its electoral policy, CASA regulations, and other independent regulations or code of ethics. However, ICASA emphasized that its open code does not intervene in news and programming operations of the broadcasters. Those quote. Its regulations further states, again, open quote, broadcasting service licensees' role during election does not differ from their normal journalistic role during non-election periods. Normal ethical considerations will continue to apply. A distinguishing feature of the election period is the obligation to achieve equitable coverage of political parties or independent candidates without abdicating news value judgments.
Thank you. The Honorable Mdagani.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Honorable Minister, I know that you are dealing with a very difficult question because for the first time in our country, we are going to have independent candidates or individuals. Then this issue is going to be raising lot and lot of questions. But we hope that, Honorable Minister, in your work as you do your oversight over this department, you'll be able to ensure two things: that individual right and then the interests of the individual and the parties are catered for. May I then make this follow-up question a short one, Honorable Minister? How are the rights and interests of individual candidates also going to be taken into consideration in line with the party election cast? I know, Honorable Minister, as we're answering the main question, you touch on this matter, but I think it's important to expand further in order for the society to know exactly how we're going to deal with these sensitive issues.
Thank you. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Mdagana. The CASA regulations afford the same protection for individual candidates as political parties in respect of party election broadcast and political advertisements. The individual candidates will be allocated slots for party election broadcast as it was done in the last local government elections. The political advertisements are a matter of choice as they are paid for by parties or individuals. Same principles apply for both parties and individual candidates. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. Is that a full? The Honorable Mazzoni.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Minister, thank you very much for that answer. And you said something particular that is very important. You said that ICASA is going to adhere to the regulations the way they did in 2021. So, Minister, given that the constitutional mandate of ICASA and the SABC is to ensure equitable and free treatment of all political parties and now the individuals that are going to be joining in the political race, can you today give us the assurance that all party election broadcasts and the slots that are allocated will be granted to anyone who's capable of creating an advert on all provincial and national stations?
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Mazzoni. I think the point states that all contestants, be they party or individuals, during elections with regard to slot, will be entitled to equity without changing the normal programs of different institutions. And that principle will stand. As I've already said that, you may be unhappy on a particular slot about equity, but over a particular period, there's a way in which they cancel off whatever deficit that found its way. That's how I respond to your question. Thanks.
Thank you. The Honorable Tambo.
I'll take the question, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Yes, Minister. Firstly, in case there is no equitable distribution, what are the consequences for SABC? But in light of the continued strike by the Communications Workers Union, what contingencies are in place to ensure that the elections coverage is not adversely affected? Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable, the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Mkhwebane. Naturally, consequence interventions which are, in my view, administered by the Electoral Court and the IEC, they kick in because unfairness in as far as elections are concerned, there are adjudication institutions in that regard, which are well known. Two, when it comes to strike, we hope that matter will be resolved. We are following it very closely, but we have taken an attitude that it must be resolved between themselves and their direct employer. But we believe it will be resolved, but we cannot say tomorrow and so on. But our biggest appeal, the sooner it is resolved, the better, because we didn't want to see it interfering with elections. Thanks.
Thank you. The Honorable Majosi.
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson. Can I keep my video closed so that I can keep a connection? Because I'm
Proceed.
on the road. Honorable Minister, we have seen how fake political news can derail elections campaigns and cause unnecessary panic in various countries. Therefore, I would like to know what measures the SA Broadcasting Corporation has in place to clamp down on the spread of political misinformation, as many South Africans will predominantly be looking to them for their daily political updates, as has been the case in the past. Thank you.
Honorable Majosi, is it possible you still have minutes? Just repeat the main question. The minister didn't get it right. You still have minutes? Yes. Seconds.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Honorable Minister, we have seen how fake political news can derail election campaigns and cause unnecessary panic in various countries. Therefore, I would like to know what measures the SA Broadcasting Corporation has in place to clamp down on the spread of political misinformation, as many South Africans will predominantly be looking to them for their daily political updates, as has been the case in the past.
Thank you. Honorable the Minister.
I hope I've understood you, Honorable Majosi. I once worked underground for a long time. A number of institutions which find themselves as vehicles for misinformation, be it TikTok or any such similar institutions, are having a particular agreement and code with the IEC. Similarly, those are governed in terms of that. Of course, as government will also be watching whenever such occurs, we will always make sure that ICASA as a regulatory board and other related regulatory institutions will stay close to that. But at the end of the day, whatever breach that occurs in that regard, be it misinformation by whoever, from whatever direction, once it's actually produced as evidential information, I repeat, the adjudication institutions for elections will handle that. Thanks.
Thank you. We now proceed to question 170, also asked to the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies by the Honorable Hendricks, the Honorable the Minister.
The Thank you all, Jamaa. Under South African SA Connect Phase 1, we have connected 170 public facilities in the region of Kwakwa you've spoken about, Thabo Mofokeng, 23 healthcare facilities, 48 facilities upgraded by SITA, all with free data. Kwakwa is planned as part of the Thabo Mofokeng District Municipality rollout under SA Connect in the 2025-26 financial year. We envisage data to cost as little as R5 per day once you have got access to that connectivity, which is as a result of intervention by a developmental state, which have already demonstrated in a number of areas that I've spoken about before.
Thank you. Honorable members, Honorable Hendricks is not on the platform, and we know he's the only member in the party. So according to Rule 13710, any party that is not on this follow-up questions can take charge of the question, but you'll only be allocated 1 minute, unlike if you were the person asking the question. Do we have any party that wants to take that slot, or we proceed to the next? None. Honorable Kumbu, this is your time.
Thank you, House Chair. Minister, please share some of the key findings and recommendations which have emanated from the study on the cost to communicate. Are there further reductions that South Africans can look forward to as far as data is concerned? Thank you.
Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Gumbu. Amongst others, the study recommended the finalization of the amendment of Electronic Communications Act. This will afford the regulator, for instance, CASA, the power to deal with issues relating to, amongst others, the pricing of mobile data as well as market features that impede, restrict, or distort competition in the telecommunications sector. The data prices vary significantly across different regions within Africa, including South Africa. The Data Service Market Inquiry recommended that mobile operators should reduce the data price by 30% to 50%. The study further indicated that the price of data can still be reduced by 55%. Currently, South Africa average price of 1 gigabyte of data is approximately 78 Rand 50 cents. However, there are new interventions that were put in place, such as SA Connect Phase 2. We have seen the price of data costing as little as 5 Rand from 78 in the areas where SA Connect has intervened. Thanks.
Thank you. We now proceed to the Honorable Bodlani.
Minister, your recent reply to our day parliamentary question indicates that you missed your own targets of connecting 10,000 Wi-Fi hotspots, achieving only 231. We believe that this is because of the overlap between BBI and USASA. What are you doing, Minister, to bring synergy between these two entities to ensure that communities in Northwest, Northern Cape, and Kwakwa do not fall through the cracks? Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bodlani. The issue of BBI and Centec is an issue of not allowed to impede the speed of connectivity, because we've realized that it requires legislative amendments. Now, we had to look at the contestation of codes. Which one is urgent? Is it the connectivity or that? So in the meantime, as we analyze policy and legislation that will require that will actually be the founding principle for that merging of the two. We've just unlocked the processes of connectivity. And I want to say to you, by March last year, we had connected 970 sites. And we analyzed and dealt with processes. After we have unlocked processes, you will realize that in February, I reported to this house or the hall down there that we had connected no less than 361,000 houses. Just a week ago, we have connected no less than 567,000 households. And about Wi-Fi's, the numbers have gone close to about 9,000 or 10,000 already. But the point I want to make is that why I'm emphasizing the households is that where we have done this connection, it is those houses in the rural and townships that have got access to that 6 to 7 rand a gig. Mount Elif is one of those, Kokstad is one of those, Mudemulle is one of those, and a number of other districts that have already connected. So I've already, in answering on Al Jama, we have said it's in 25, 26, which falls in that district. Thank you, Honorable Bolan.
Thank you. The Honorable Pambo.
Chairperson, ngicela uthatha umbuzo ka Honorable Pambo.
Kubeka ma.
Thank you. Minister, access to network coverage is critical to ensure that the electorate participates maximally in the provincial and national elections of 2024. Is there a plan to ensure areas that suffer severe network issues are provided with access to electoral information? Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Sondi, on behalf of Pambo. Oh, thank you very much. Okay. I have indicated to you that we have actually improved the connectivity speed, in particular to the poor communities, townships, and rural communities. We'll be doing a series of announcements long before this election with regard to a number of poor communities which have got access to online and to television and so on through the connectivities that will afford them. So in other words, what am I trying to say? The issue you're worried about is our priority. We wish we could actually do triple, but I'm not disappointed taking to the fact that where the speed was and where the speed is. We believe that a significant number of people are going to have that access. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As you are allowed to take your seat. Yes. The next question is question 173, asked by the Honorable Dlamini to the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. The Honorable Minister will respond from the virtual platform, as I said before. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much, House Chair, and thanks to the honorable members on the platform and to Honorable Dlamini. When we started in 2019, we found that there were various challenges in the board and we had to do several things in order to bring stability. One of those was engagement with the board in order to outline areas of improvement that the board needed to deal with. That included the stabilization of the human resources and ensuring that the board has enough capacity. It was during that period that the board in 2021 appointed the Chief Executive Officer. And secondly, as a department, we seconded a staff from National to address the issue of financial management, who was then an acting CFO for the board. We also had to engage with the board to clarify important issues that relate to the disbursement of the funds of the various communities, as well as ensuring that we limit the nature of litigations that were there against the board. Subsequently, in 2023, we then had adverts, maybe to say from 2022, we advertised for the appointment of the board because the tenure of the previous board had come to an end. We did that in a transparent way so that many people can be afforded an opportunity to apply for serving into this important structure, which was done. And in May, we actually appointed the full board. And I must say that in terms of the legislation, the board is appointed in the following manner. 4 members of the board are appointed by the minister in consultation with the King, together with the Premier of the province of KwaZulu-Natal and the chairperson of the House of the Traditional Leaders in KwaZulu-Natal. The other 4 members of the board are appointed in consultation between the Premier of the province, the King, and the chair of the House of Traditional Leaders of the province. And then the nominee who will chair the board is appointed by the King, Isilo Samabandla. And that happened. So in ensuring that communities and their traditional leaders understand the workings of the board and work out the governance system as well as disbursement, there has been various consultations between this current board and the House, as well as Amakosi, who are affected and are members, or rather beneficiaries, who are part of the Ingonyama Trust, to make sure that they themselves, they are part of the accountability structure that the board has to work with, because the land that the board is governing is actually the land of those communities under their traditional leaders. The other question that has been asked is, how have we ensured that we improve the administration capacity? I must say to this House that now we do have the full-time CFO of the board, as well as the company secretary of the board, and we filled a number of posts that were vacant within the Ingonyama Trust, which will enable the trust and the board to do the work as they are supposed to. Thank you very much, House Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I will now invite Mhlonishwa Babu Dlamini.
Thank you very much, our Chairperson, and thanks to the Minister for clarifying what has happened. But I want to just check what measures that has been put in place to improve the accountability of Ingonyama Trust, especially in relation to matters which relate to the disbursement of funds, land administration and general governance, and financial control. How will good governance and accountability improve, given the measures which are being put up in place in relation to Ingonyama Trust, given the recent changes? And I'm sure the Minister understands when I say the recent changes in leadership. In other words, what mediation measures are going to be taken over and above regulatory measures to improve governance and financial control of the entity?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dlamini. I think the first part of the question has been answered too. But how will these measures improve the governance, good governance, as well as accountability? I think first and foremost is, like any other board, has to exercise its responsibility in a collective manner to ensure that it works within the prescripts that govern that institution. And that's what we believe the board is going to adhere to. And if you look at Ingonyama Trust Act, the primary responsibility is to ensure that the board manages this land working with the trustee, who is the king, to ensure that the interest of those communities whose land is being governed are actually taken into account. That will talk to how the disbursement of resources where such land has been exploited either through mining or any other kind of development, building of malls in some communal areas, or even, I would say, supermarkets and other commercial activities, that through those leases, the benefits of those resources will actually accrue to the respective communities. And this is what we've been seeking to improve, because one of the weaknesses is that for a number of years, such transparency to communities about how much is available in their resources that have come as a result of such commercial activities have never actually been done in accordance with the prescript. So this is the systems put in place will seek to improve that. In the latest, what the Honorable Dlamini has raised is the changes. Actually, those changes has only been the change of the nominee, where the king, rightfully so in terms of the law, he can be the chair of the board if he decides not to appoint a nominee. And that's the choice he has made. What we have done on our part from the ministry has been to have an engagement with the king in his capacity as the new chair of the board, to brief him about what the responsibilities are for him in the management of the structure and working together with the collective. We've also introduced the king to the entirety of the board, and we trust that he will execute that responsibility as is expected of a chairperson of any board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mhlonishwa Mbambama.
Thank you, House Chair. Minister, I acknowledge the interventions you say you have put in place to improve accountability from the Ingonyama Trust. Considering your department's dismal failure in land reform and governance, what makes you think that your interventions will now be successful while you and your department failed the country on land administration and the disbursement of funds? I am particularly worried about the people on the ground. What will they gain from your interventions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Mbabama. Firstly, I must actually put a disclaimer on what we have said about the dismal failure of the department in undertaking land reform in this country, because that is not true. Yes, maybe the pace, as everybody like yourselves, Honorable Member, might like, may not be to that extent, and we all know the reasons for that. Part of those relate to resources and the competing needs that, you know, everybody has on the fiscus. So that is understandable. Secondly, it might relate to the management and the governance of the lands that has been taken over by communities after transfer. And then we have worked to ensure that we train, we assist. Obviously, issues of challenges and disputes among communities will always be issues that are ongoing where we all need to assist. So I think it is important for me to make that disclaimer on what we have said. Yes, we are confident that the work that this board is undertaking in engaging with the traditional leaders and their communities whose land is governed under Ingonyama Trust will be able, once they have the full information about what is happening in the trust and their role in actually engaging with the trust about the development needs for their community, will improve that governance. Collectively, the board, working with ISILO, I'm sure they will also improve other matters that might require the board to do so. Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson.
Thank you. The Honorable Matthias.
Chair, I'll take the question.
Proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Minister, it is clear that matters of accountability of the Ingonyama Trust regarding financial management and land administration have been left to their device for political reasons by the ANC. When will you, Minister, Honorable Minister, concede failures to manage the affairs of Ingonyama Trust and the people living in KZN, because it's all about accountability to the community? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And one does appreciate that we're in an election period, so at times we will say things that are not supposed, or rather are not consistent with the matters at hand. The Ingonyama Trust is governed by the board, with the chair being the nominee of the king. So there is no party political appointment to the Ingonyama Trust. People are appointed, as I've outlined earlier, how the Act dictates the appointment of the board must be done. And this Parliament, through the Portfolio Committee, has been engaging with Ingonyama Trust not only during this term of office, from its inception in 1994 and subsequently after the amendment in 1997. So it's not like this is the new board or a new institution that we're talking about. It has actually been operational. Obviously, the Portfolio Committee has been concerned, so as the minister, about the disbursement policy that had not been undertaken by the board to the satisfaction of the community. So that has nothing to do with any party political issue. I would like to submit, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now proceed to question number 174. Asked to the Minister of Employment and Labor by the Honorable Volmarans. The Honorable, the Minister.
Yeah. Thank you to Honorable Vormalans for this question. Yes, the department introduced the labor activation programs, which we call them the LAB, following the recession in 2008, 2009. So in the financial year of 2017-18, LAB was massified and the target was set at 450,000. But there's a big no on the labor activation program. There is no 15 billion that has been spent. We've allocated 15 billion for the job creation. So that money has not been spent. We're still following the necessary processes to deal with that. The department established the labor activation program to intervene in the unemployment crisis, and Section 5D of the Employment Insurance Act provides that the funds of the UIF can be used for financing of the retention of the contributors in employment and re-entry of the contributors into the labor market and any other scheme aimed at the vulnerable workers. And Section 48(1)(a), Roman figure 4 of the UI Act requires that the UIF board advise the minister on the creation of the schemes to alleviate the effects of unemployment. So the UIF established the labor activation programs to give effect to these intentions in the legislation. And the lab currently pursues this mandate through 3 objectives, which are to enhance employability of the unemployed through the training of the unemployed beneficiaries, to enable entrepreneurship through enterprise development, to preserve jobs, temporary employer-employee relief scheme in partnership with the CCMA, which administers the applications or the applications process for distressed companies and business turnaround and recovery programs. Now, in this financial year, we are targeting, or in this financial year starting on the 1st of April 2024, we are targeting the creation of 360,000 jobs through LEP. In 2025 financial year, we have a target of 820,000 jobs. And we further target 50% of some of these. And I've mentioned they come from the vulnerable groups, mainly women, young people, and people with disabilities. So in a few weeks' time, I will be issuing certificates to the project owners. So the program is intended to equip individuals with skills and experience needed to secure lasting employment. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Wolmarans.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. It seems that the project at hand is very encouraging. It is undertaken under the Labour Activation Program. It promises to contribute immensely in the fight against unemployment. But what I would want to find out, Minister, does the department have any capacity to carry through this project such that it also reaches the far-flung rural areas and not only focusing in the urban centers? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Wolmarans. The department has put in place a provincial structure for the labor activation programs, providing in each and every province, or for the 9 provinces, deputy director positions, 7 of which have already been filled. The structure further provides for 27 assistant directors positions, which is 3 per province, 26 of which are filled. In addition to the approved structure, the UIF head office has appointed 6 interns for the labor activation program. So the department has the public employment services branch with a footprint across the labor centers, all the labor centers in the country that recruit the labor activation projects. Therefore, the department has embarked on a process to evaluate the structural capacity of the UIF to execute its mandate. This includes the Labor Activation Program Chief Directorate. And indeed, the current capacity of LAB Chief Directorate needs to be beefed up. In the short term, the department is in the process of augmenting that capacity of LAB. And the department is also exploring collaboration with the provincial governments to roll out LAB. And initial engagement have started with the Gauteng provincial government, with others to follow.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Denner.
Thank you, House Chair. Honourable Minister, the Labour Activation Program doesn't have a very positive image with South Africans at large due to the Tuja Capital Fund scandal, as we all know. And this is also something that we will follow closely in the time to come. But except for that, millions have been allocated for this program to fund employability proposals from companies involved to train unemployed people, which you must also admit sounds very dodgy. Anyway, so what clear mechanisms, if any, are being built into agreements with the companies involved to absolutely ensure that trainees are indeed provided with concrete skills resulting in employability as a return on investment for the billions to be spent on something that is so difficult to measure? Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister.
I wouldn't like to comment on the Tuja matter. And you know very well that the matter in the legal jargon is sub judice. So we are awaiting the judge. So, however, I must be able to indicate that we've put a lot of mechanisms before we can be able to give those companies any agreement and money. There's due diligence which we're doing. And we have also employed an audit firm, which is going to be looking at all the processes and also monitoring what is being implemented on a quarterly basis and demanding reports. As they apply for this funding, we also want assurances from companies to be able to confirm that they are going to absorb those young people as they are being trained for at least a minimum of a year to 2 years. We think that after that, they would have gained a lot of experience. But some of the programs, it's possible that they can be permanent jobs. Some of them, it will be self-employment. They would be able to go beyond what we call the short term. It might be medium to long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Three.
Thank you, House Chair. Minister, the UIF spokesperson, Makosongo Buthelezi, at one stage admitted that in a radio interview that the UIF system was overwhelmed because it was built to process a certain number of claims, but with the increase in unemployment and other demands placed on the system has become overwhelmed because it is taking on more than what it was built for. Now, Minister, what steps have been taken to upgrade the system in order to ensure that claims are timeously settled for maternity, death, the loss of income, and indeed the creation of the much needed jobs that you spoke of earlier? And if no steps have been taken, why not? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Pring. Indeed, we were the first to concede that our system during COVID, when we had to pay more than 5 million workers, which was about 62 billion rand, that our systems collapsed because they were not meant to deal with such huge numbers. But also a project which we had started 2 years ago, we had appointed PwC, the audit firm, to do a very deep diagnostic of the particular funds, which is also the compensation fund, not just the UIF. And in terms of that, we've received the results. We're dealing with that report. We've started now to do the implementation of that, looking at the structures, looking at the systems, looking at the skills. And remember, the UIF and the compensation fund, you are talking about the medical insurance, you are talking about the pension, you're talking about a very, very sophisticated system which you need, which is like the system you get in the insurance companies or in the banks. And we are in the process now of fundamentally restructuring those two funds in order to have the right skills and the right capacity to be able to deal with the task at hand. And indeed, a number of workers have complained about how they are frustrated in terms of their claims and so on. And we are up to task now in trying to fundamentally turn those two institutions around. But it's going to be a process. It's not an event. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Bahrain.
Minister, thank you for the details of the LIP. However, it costs government, according to your department, 250,000 rand to create a job. And it's not a job, it's a job opportunity. Universally, it's understood that the private sector creates jobs and not government. it's not about time that the government gets to understand the nature of job creation and economic empowerment. When will they ever learn? Minister, as a labor lawyer, I could help you try and access the LAP when you leave Parliament. Thank you.
Yes.
Honorable Minister.
No, we have enough labor lawyers and better labor lawyers who can help us. We know very well that your advice would not be what we want. But let me tell you, your calculation is incorrect. It depends on the industry you are dealing with. There are certain industries which are very expensive to create just one job. But there are industries which you spend far less than what you're talking about. Some of the industries you're talking about 10,000 to create a job, but others can even go to more than the figure which we have quoted. It depends on which industry you are talking about. Industries differ. That's what I can be able to tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We will now proceed, honorable members, to question 197 that has been posed by the Honorable S.J. Graham to the Minister in the Presidency for Electricity. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, House Chair, and thank you very much to Honorable Graham for the question. Just to say the following, that the improvement of the energy availability factor and unplanned outages are as a result of concerted efforts focusing on what we had identified as priority power stations, namely Kusile, Kendal, Majuba, Mata, Tutuka, and Duva, where each power station has its detailed recovery plan. A total of 3,510 megawatts was recovered by January of 2024 through this intervention and also working with the private sector. The highest level of planned maintenance was performed between the periods of December 2023 and January 2024, reaching an average of 18% of the generation capacity. Just to put it into context, the last time we reached these proportions of planned maintenance was in 2022, thanks to the work of the board in placing to good use the fiscal support received from National Treasury. The downside of increased maintenance was a negative impact on EAF. However, the deliberate spike in planned maintenance aims to improve the reliability of the generation fleet, deliver long-term benefits, and ensure the security of energy supply. Although heightened maintenance negatively impacted the EAF, it remains a necessary trade-off as a deliberate spike in planned maintenance is intended to improve the generation fleet's reliability to deliver long-term benefits. Yes. To deliver long-term benefits and ensure security of energy supply is restored. Not only has the plan started to yield desirable results as far as the EAF is concerned, but the unplanned capacity loss factor has also taken a positive turn from 34% of generation capacity in January of 2023 to 30% of January 2024. The gradual improvement brought about by the generation operational recovery plan has started to be visible as far as the frequency and intensity of load shedding is concerned, and we have to look over a period of the past 5.5 months, the period running from September 2023 to mid-February of 2024. Based on our linear modeling, planned maintenance been reduced by anything between 25 and 50% between the period of September 2023 and February of 2024, load shedding could have been wholly averted for this period. And consequently, a much improved EAF could have been reported, edging annualized EAF performance closer to the planned 65% target to March of 2023. However, this could have left the system vulnerable and weaker going into winter. Just to indicate that the increase in planned maintenance between the period of September 2023 and February 2024 has created buffers in the available capacity going into the winter of 2024. From the end of March 2024, we'll begin to reduce planned maintenance from the high of 8,000 megawatts to around 4,000 megawatts by May of 2024. Effectively, this means that we have added an additional 4,000 megawatts of generation capacity to the grid. In addition to Unit 4 of Medupi, we will return in August, which will return in August 2024, followed by Kubek Unit 2 in September. We are going to increase the available capacity. And therefore, all indications are that although on an annualized basis would not have reached the 65%, but during the latter part of the financial year will be close to the 65% EAF, and we remain on course to achieve the target of 75% by March of 2025.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Graham.
Thank you, Chairperson. Minister, you're the champion of the Energy Action Plan launched in 2022 with the purpose of addressing the energy crisis. Now, the DS supports the plan as one of the mechanisms to be used to solve the rolling blackouts. But since the inception of the energy plan, there has been a major focus on the energy availability factor. Now, according to the VGBE report, the international standard for power systems of similar age to that of South Africa's energy infrastructure are running at an average of 78% EAF, while ours has remained below 60%, attaining an all-time low of 50% in February. That means that 50% of the Eskom fleet is not working. However, the report also criticized the focus on EAF as a determination of operational success of Eskom, stating that the fixation on the EAF is a dead end and leads to poorer plant performance. Now, the Democratic Alliance's plan to rescue South Africa speaks to the unbundling of Eskom and the breaking of the monopoly of government around energy provisioning. By expanding the basket of energy supply, the focus will move from a centralized energy availability factor under the control of government to a composite EAF that brings in all energy role players. This will also eliminate the approach of Eskom to prioritize EAF over long-term solutions to the issues plaguing the power utility. Minister, do you agree with the VGBE report that your focus on the EAF has not only failed to achieve any of the targets you've set, but has also led to poor decision-making and prioritizing performance over maintenance, which has created a consequentially high risk of failure of our entire energy system, as evidenced by ongoing load shedding? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
So what is unfortunate with the report, Honourable Graham, is that it makes for selective reading of the VGBE report. So I thought it will be instructive that you read it in its totality. So it does make that assertion, and at the end, it proposes a set of recommendations to ensure that there's a broad spread of interventions. And I want to indicate that all of those three transversal areas that the VGB points to being some of the solutions to address load shedding are receiving attention. And in fact, when I produce what I refer to as a diagnostic report, having done an extensive visit to all the power stations, I've made a reference to all of those things that the VGB refers to. And in fact, we have already initiated those actions. What are those actions? From a people's management point of view, it's just the stabilization of management at all levels, including the apex of Eskom, the appointment of the CEO, the inspired appointment of the board appointing the head of generation, Mr. Ngumalo, and we have since appointed permanent, if you like, general managers at all the power stations, and also introduce incentives that are performance related. And then on the engineering part, they are proposing that there's a need for us to ensure that there's concerted effort on maintenance and ensuring that there's some degree of collaboration with the original equipment manufacturers. That's what we have done. The major three original equipment manufacturers are now in the space. Essentially, we have eliminated the middlemen. And it also refers to the presence of corruption, malfeasance, and leakage. And as you will know, that working with the work stream number 6, a number of investigations are happening, arrests have been made, and convictions have been achieved. So I thought that the total reading of the VGB report will reveal that the actions that they propose are already underway at ESCOM.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable N.E. Dlamini.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Honourable Minister. Sorry, I have a bit of flu. What happened? Yeah, Honourable Minister, considering the marginal improvement in the average energy availability factor, which is below ESCOM's target for the 2024 financial year, how did the 6 priority stations support the marginal improvement in the average energy availability factor overall, and which focus areas of the EAF recovery plan proved difficult to address and achieve the targeted EAF?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Dlamini. You're absolutely correct. We have identified the 6 power stations, mainly Kusile, Midupi, Kusile, Kendal, Majuba, Matla, Tutuka, and Duba. And the choice of those power stations were scientific, as they put it in science. There's a principle we refer to as the Pareto principle. 20% effort, 80% return. So in the configuration of the matrix, trying to understand where can we get the maximum returns, and returns in this instance refers to the megawatts to be made available to the grid. We had identified that these are the power stations that gives us the shortest path to the resolution of load shedding. And I want to say, as I stand before you now, that as a result of those interventions, collectively, we have been able to recover over a period of a 12 months period, an additional 3,510 megawatts of capacity derived from those 6 power stations and other interventions. I must say that we continue to focus on a power station like Tutuka. We only had 1 unit operating. We're able to place one of our most seasoned engineers, Mr. Bruce Moyo. And that's why I'm saying the VGB reports, its recommendations are 8 months late, because we've already made those interventions. And we're beginning to see that they've been able to add an additional 2 generating units, and want to maintain that on a consistent basis. Just on the second half of your question, so the primary focus, for an example, in a power station like Kendal, where the partial load losses, that is the inefficiency of the power station, is as a result of the power station exceeding its license emissions parameters. So we're working with the private sector to ensure that we're able to be within the parameters of emissions license, whilst being able to ramp up performance. So the partial load losses.
Thank you, Honourable
had
Minister.
accounted for 6,800
Your time is now expired.
Bring it down consistently.
The next supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Mr. Schlengwa.
Thank you, Chair. I think it got connectivity problems. You load shed the minister's time when he was answering the question, Honourable Chair. Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Minister, you know, when you were appointed, you were known as a Minister of Electricity and not as a Minister of Load Shedding. But we know your main particular responsibility is to try and avoid the frequency of load shedding. Now, I'm extremely concerned, Honourable Minister, about the frequency and the lack of maintenance of existing lines, not power stations. Because in the area where I come from, Umgababa, Umkomas, Kregiben, for the last 5 days or so, there's been no electricity or intermittent electricity. And this impacts greatly on the citizens of that area. Minister, would you intervene in this area and see what can be done by the maintenance officials of ESCOM in that area?
Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Honourable Singh. I think if you look at the the ecosystem of energy supply in the country. I think you are referring to the downstream challenges, essentially your distribution. So we have moved from the generation, the transmission, the last mile connectivity. So a number of challenges that beset that area of the ecosystem. The first one is the issues of illegal connections. So essentially placing a significant amount of load beyond the, if you like, the capacity of the asset or the substation or the transformer, which results in the asset failing. So one of the things that we've been working on together with SALGA, engaging all the municipalities, is to ensure that we agree on a set of conditions for us to be able to move into that space and replace these assets. The first one is to ensure that we clamp down on illegal connections. So that's the first part. And then the second one is that there has to be a commitment from everyone that draws from that asset that we must agree on, if you like, a penalty associated with the failure of that asset. And we have been able to compute it to, on average, about 6,000, and we know that there are communities or households that cannot afford, and in that instance, it's about 500 rands, and once there's a 60% of the households that have paid, then we are able to roll out going forward. And then the third condition is to ensure that all those that can pay should pay. And that's why we're part of this intervention is to ensure that associated with the return or the fixing or the replenishment of the asset is the installation of the smart meters. For those households that cannot afford, they'll be taken care of. But those that can afford should make sure that they commit to those set of principles, and we have already started rolling out the program, and I'm happy to make the intervention in those areas.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. Arising from your response, Honourable Minister, the ACDP appreciates the focus on maintenance of power stations as opposed to merely keeping the lights on at all costs at the expense of maintenance as in the past. We've taken note of the recommendations of the VGBE report and you're expanding on the report. The report also recommended the immediate establishment of an interim team of independent experts. While we appreciate that this is largely an ESCOM management decision, will the Minister share with the House whether such experts have been seconded, and if so, will this continue going forward as part of the process to meet the EIF target and reduce load shedding?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Swart. I was making the point to some colleagues that the VGB report does stick to what I call a standard template of recommendations. And at the end, they say, we therefore recommend that there should be additional work to be done in the following area. Just to give Honorable Swart and members the comfort, remember that we've got the Energy and National Energy Crisis Committee referred to as NECOM. So this is a meeting place of government and private sector to ensure that there's some degree of convergence on how we're going to resolve this preeminent question that is facing a post-apartheid South Africa. It's a challenge of existential proportions because we know, if you like, the kind of impact that it has on the South African economy. So, Honorable Swart, in that context, we are already receiving technical support from the private sector in areas where there's, if you like, deficit with regards to expertise or there's no sufficient supply internally inside ESCOM in relation to the kind of expertise that are required. And I'm happy to say to the country that we're already on that path. We're receiving, if you like, extraordinary support from the private sector, and a number of these individuals will be embedded in those 6 priority power stations. And that's why earlier on, I make reference to the point that a myriad of these recommendations that derives out of the VGB report are already receiving attention, a very useful instrument to help us to make the intervention. But I want to give the country the comfort that on almost all of those recommendations, we are already acting, and I'm sure that the benefits will be realized sooner. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, we'll proceed to question 202 that has been asked by the Honourable Manyi to the Honourable Minister in the Presidency for Electricity. Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, House Chair, and thank you very much to Honorable Mani for the question. I think it's important at the onset to state that it is incorrect to suggest that there has been a recent, as Mr. Mani, Honorable Mani puts it, high frequency of load shedding, close quote. It is important to note that the stage 6 load shedding, which occurred on the 9th of February midnight until the 11th of February midnight, was as an outlier and as a result of a cluster of units that had failed during that period. But what we have experienced is that there's been a gradual improvement brought about by the generation operational recovery plan and has started to yield visible results as far as the frequency and the intensity of load shedding is concerned, especially in the past 5.5 months, the period of September 2023 to February of 2024. As I stated earlier, if you had to do an objective comparison of load shedding between December of 2022 and February of 2023 on the one side, and compared with December of 2023 to February of 2024. So essentially a comparable period, you'll realize that the load shedding hours were reduced from 1,008 hours to about 1,217 hours, a reduction of no less than 600 hours. So it is important to know that the renewable energy does not and will not address base load requirements. So you need a base load, as Minister Mantashe referred to earlier on. You still need a combination of coal, you still need nuclear, you still need gas to anchor, if you like, the energy mix. Remember that renewable energy thrives on the redundancy of base load. So I think it's important that there is that appreciation. So in addition to this work, what we are doing in the short term is to ensure that we are repurposing or converting our peaking plants, that is Ankerleg and Horigwa, and we want to use gas as a fuel source. If we do that, we are going to attain a number of things. First is that is a exponential reduction in the kilowatt hour of production. The second one is that we're going to achieve, if you like, base load benefits because we will be able to run gas as a fuel source on the basis of base load. The improvement of the EAF and unplanned outages results from, as I mentioned earlier on, the concerted efforts that we are making at the priority 6 power stations, as I've mentioned before. And as a result of that intervention, we've been able to recover 3,500 megawatts. I want to conclude on this question by stating that the notion that ESCOM is experiencing a further decline in performance is not supported by facts or evidence, as mentioned here. It is important to emphasize that the setbacks of the last stage 6 load shedding was as a result of that cluster of units failing. And we are on course to reduce the intensity and frequency of load shedding. As I always make the point in public, this is the one ministry that is very easy to assess. You don't have to be a scientist. All that you simply do is to compute the number of hours that your lights are on or off compared to the same period last year, and you will see that there is that improvement. But the point is not just to reduce the intensity and frequency. The point is to ensure that we liquidate load shedding and the economy is able to stand on her feet and create the kind of jobs that are required for us to achieve our developmental mandates. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Mani.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Are you taking the question, Honourable Member?
Taking the question.
Please
Chairperson.
proceed.
Yes. Thank you, Honourable Minister. So, Minister, considering that we are told that the megawatts count, especially those which have been contracted for the renewable energy, is about around 7,000 megawatts. How many megawatts or renewable, in fact, are generated from the IPPs during peak hours between 5:30 in the morning to 9 o'clock in the morning? and from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. So if you can just help there.
Honorable Minister.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Mkhwebane. You're absolutely correct to say that there has to be an appreciation of the mix. But just to your point, as you'll know that there are two fuel sources, forms of production from renewable energy sources. So the first one is the PV, and the fuel source there is the sun. And you know that we get that benefit of peak. So essentially we're getting that after 9 in the morning up until about 16 hours during the day. And then the other one is on the wind. We're really getting during the early hours of the morning. So to your question, what is the amount of megawatts that we are getting from renewables during the peak? And I guess that your question really is just an appreciation that the biggest demand is during the peak, in particular the PM peak. No, we are receiving absolutely what is negligible or close to nothing. And that's why it's important that when we look at the configuration of the mix, battery storage will be important. During the periods of the day or morning where we have, if you like, optimal benefit from renewables during the day, the sun, and then in the early hours, the wind, we're able to store that capacity and we're able to engage it during the peak. And that's why the conversation is important. Should not be a binary discussion of whether you need base load or you need renewables. You need all of those, including battery storage. The tragedy of the situation in the country is that you are pitting one fuel source against the other. It's a very unhelpful conversation. So I think the issue around whether the renewables are helping you during the peak is a pointed conversation, just to illustrate that you need everything. And once we are able to enable everything, you'll see that the mix will be able to meet our energy requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next question will be asked by the Honorable Piri.
Ke a leboga modulasetulo. Ke a leboga modulasetulo ka nnete mo lekgotla phetiši re ikgantšha ka wena tsebo ka maitemogelo ka nnete o tseba taba tša gago motoko wa gešo. Potšišo ya ka ke ya gore apart from the unprecedented levels of unplanned unavailability, what has been the impact of lower than expected IPP capacity being available on load shedding stage and delays in adding the risk mitigation IPP procurement program to the ESCOM grid to ensure sufficient capacity to respond to significant unplanned breakdowns or disruptions of supply in order to protect the power system? Ke a leboga modulasetulo.
The Honorable Minister.
No, ke a leboga Honorable Piri ka potšišo ya lena. Rata go gatelela gore diphetogo tsona re a di bona. Le gore maikemišetšo a rena a go kgontšhisa re fediša ntho ya go tlhokega ga motlakase ga šešo re e fitlhelela mare re kgona go bona gore temana yona e gona. So just as an indication, if you look at the May of 2023, and I'm using that as a baseline so that there's an appreciation of what the trend line is over a period of time, so that there's no instantaneous analysis of what the performance is, because we don't have an appreciation of a bigger picture. So the amount of unplanned capacity loss factor, that is the amount of generation capacity that has been out as a result of the inefficiencies of this unit or their unreliability, was averaging about 17,369 megawatts. But we have seen an extraordinary improvement. For an example, we've noticed that during the period of December 2023, we are averaging about 13,473. So essentially a difference of 4,000 megawatts. So that has given us an opportunity to ramp up planned maintenance, what we call opportunity maintenance. And just on the IPPs, just to indicate that the IPP solar assists in part in managing demand during peak supply periods, during the period of 9 a.m. to 14 p.m. That's why I spoke earlier on the need to have a battery storage so that we're able to have this access capacity being stored so that we can exploit it during the periods of the peak when we need it the most. So we're doing everything possible to ensure that we are able to look at the totality of the energy sources. And when we look at that aggregation, and if you like a measure of how best to exploit which generation capacity at which time, you will see that we are getting closer to the resolution of this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Graham.
Thank you, Chairperson. Minister, it's been a year since you took on the role of Minister of Electricity with a view to you remaining in that position until the load shedding crisis was resolved. You've said that you'll be out of the job by the end of this year. In the year past, the energy availability factor has plummeted, generation has declined, load shedding has become a permanent fixture, and the cost of the transmission grid has escalated from 190 billion rand to almost 400 billion. All while your office has cost the taxpayers millions of rands to run. Your ongoing and persistent claim that we have turned a corner and that the crisis is all but resolved is disputed by most experts. Minister, will you admit the truth that load shedding will remain with us for the foreseeable future? I thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
No, thank you very much, Honourable Graham. I always make the distinction between an expert and a commentator. Those who speak most of the time and have got the power of the mic, they are no experts. They've never visited a power station. They are not engineers. They just read an article on energy and they regurgitate it. So those are not experts. And then just to indicate, as a civil engineer with splendid credentials, just to say the following, that it's important to have the following appreciation. That we lost in October of 2022, we lost the 3 units at Kusile, 2,400 megawatts. And in December of 2022, we took out unit number 1 of Quebec, another 980 megawatts. So essentially, we took out 2,500 megawatts. And we only returned them in November of the following year. So it goes without saying that there would have been an intensification of load shedding because you lost 2,500 megawatts of generating capacity. And that's why I say they are not experts because they don't understand how this works, but we'll forgive them because I think it's just the excitement of the mic. But what are the issues that we are working on? So I did make the point that it is important that we have an appreciation that there has been a significant improvement both in the intensity and frequency of load shedding. I make the point that you don't have to believe me. Just ask a simple question to an average person. Was your December of 2023 better than the December of 2022? Everyone in the house here knows that your lights were on. Was your January of 2024 better than your January of 2023? The answer is in the affirmative. So don't believe me. It's a number of hours that your lights are on or off. You'll arrive at that determination. And we have already shared with the general public what is the new generation capacity that we are bringing on stream. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, we'll proceed to question number 175, asked by the Honourable Nkwanazi, the Minister in the Presidency for Electricity. The Honourable Minister? No, there hasn't been a request for a fourth question. We're now on question 175. Please proceed, Honourable Minister.
I think the point here is the thrust of the question is the efforts that we are making on expanding and modernizing transmission. I think honorable members have made a correct observation that our ability to evacuate the megawatts or the electrons rather, that is generated by new capacity coming from renewables, especially your Cape areas, the Northern Cape, the Eastern Cape, and Western Cape, is undermined by the absence of the grid. The fact that it's a legacy issue, the concentration or the density of the grid is in the northern eastern part of the country, because that's where your fuel source is, which is coal, and power stations are constructed at the mouth of the source, and therefore the density of transmission line is in the northern eastern part of the area. But if you were to do an irradiation atlas trying to understand where is the geographic location of the optimal quality of sun is concentrated in the Northern Cape. If you were to do a wind atlas, you'll find that it's in the coastal areas of the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. And those are areas where we either don't have the grid capacity or the capacity has been exhausted. And on account of ESCOM, having done an analysis of the transmission requirements on the back of the transmission development plan, they have arrived at the determination that they will need to modernize and expand the transmission by about 14,000 kilometers in the next 10 years. To put that into context, in the past 10 years, we only expanded it by 4,000 kilometers. So we must increase it by 325% fold. And then we'll require something in the order of magnitude of 390 billion rand. So what we are trying to do, working with the National Transmission Company of South Africa, is to resolve that conundrum. So we want to address two things. First is access to private sector liquidity, because we do accept that there is going to be an off-balance sheet financing, so we don't need corporate finance because the balance sheet of ESCOM is deteriorated. The fiscal matrix has also deteriorated, and we are going to do that without relinquishing ownership of the grid. And those interventions should not result in elevated tariff levels, especially for the poor, because it will result in another form of energy hunger. So I want to say that we're working with the NTCSA. We have workshopped what these options are. And once the board has applied its mind to what these options are, we will jointly be able to come back to the country to say, this is how we're going to expand the transmission line. We already have, in terms of that transmission development plan, prioritized what we call a priority corridor, or identified what we refer to as priority corridors. And these are the three main corridors located in the Northern Cape and the Western Cape. And if we're to prioritize those, we can derive an additional 2,300 megawatts. So we're putting together a bespoke solution that allows for agility, speed, transparency, ensuring that we don't relinquish ownership of the grid, but still tapping on the liquidity of the private sector. And there's a number of options before us, but once we have concluded with the National Transmission Company of South Africa, because principally that is their mandate. So I really want to not preempt what they will say, but I think there's some degree of convergence on the principles, and I'm more than confident that will come out in the public and indicate what these interventions are.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable JCN Makwanazi.
Thank you very much, House Chair, Minister. Siyabonga kakhulu impendulweni zakho uyafundisa. Kuyabonisa ukuthi ANC is really the leader of the society. Qhubeke nje. Honourable Minister, noting that the government has committed itself to the regulator and financial de-risking to create the condition for private investment in infrastructural projects in the transmission network. How is your plan on ensuring that the fiscal cost of protecting private investors from risk in transition network, one, recorded as contingent liabilities for the government and do not count as public debt? And lastly, not to pass to the end user via periodical adjustment of tariffs. Thank you, Honourable House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
No, ngiyabonga Honorable Mkhwanazi ngombuzo wakho. Siyazama ukuthi siuxazulule le nkinga yo load shedding. I've tried there. Yeah. Maybe just to indicate, I think the first principle to state, and it's something I said earlier on, is the fact that the financing of the modernization and expansion of the grid is not going to be corporate finance, it's going to be off balance sheet for the reasons that I've mentioned above. The fact that the balance sheet of ESCOM is constrained and also the fiscal matrix have deteriorated. Having said that, I must state that in terms of ESCOM's financing, the first 3 years, ESCOM has got some degree of financing. They can do, I think, approximately 1,400 kilometers. But I think working with the NTCSA, we think that 1,400 kilometers will not be sufficient to enable us to ensure that we're able to ramp up, if you like, the rollout of transmission. And like I said, part of the principles as we're looking at this private sector financing, in addition to state ownership of the transmission, is that whatever solution that we are seeking will not say want to go to Minister of Finance, Minister Godongwana, and seek sovereign guarantees. There are existing instruments, and I think there are countries in the world that have illustrated that this is possible. Just to mention a few, Colombia, Brazil, and Peru, Chile have pursued these options, and we really are learning and unlearning from their experiences. And we'll do everything possible to ensure that this does not result in an additional burden to the end consumer, resulting in elevated levels of transmission. We still want to make energy accessible and affordable to everyone. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The second supplementary question is by the Honorable J. Graham.
Thank you, Chairperson. Minister, as someone with an LLB cum laude, let me state that the powers assigned to you by the President emanate from Section 34 of the Electricity Regulation Act, which speaks to new generation capacity. Listen for meaning. This section does not cover powers and functions in respect of transmission. This would indicate, as per the President's advisory, that other powers and functions contained in the Electricity Regulation Act will remain under the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. Putting aside the obvious conclusion that you are not legislatively mandated to work with the transmission sector and that the existing legislation does not yet provide for the establishment of an independent transmission operator or actions associated therewith, a further concern is that government has no credible plan in terms of the extension of the grid. The IRP provides for 14,000 kilometers of grid over the next 8 years, while the Transmission Development Plan only provides for 1,675 kilometers by 2027, leaving the bulk for those last 8 years. Minister, how do you propose to sell a plan for hundreds of billions of rands to the private sector when you have no mandate and no idea of what you need by when? Thank you.
The Honorable Minister.
Well, I think it's a legal reading of the problem statement. I do sympathize with you because you did declare that you hold an LLB. You know nothing about financing and engineering. So. No, you don't have to be upset. I think the starting point for knowing that you don't know is to accept that you don't know. So let me just say the following. We have made the point that in terms of the transmission development plan, ESCOM makes the point that you'll need to expand the transmission by about 14,000 kilometers over the next 10 years. And what is financed from ESCOM is it's about 3 years, and that is amounts to 1,400 kilometers. And our view is that is inadequate to allow us an opportunity to aggressively onboard the renewables. And that's why we're seeking these bespoke solutions on how best you can access the liquidity that is sitting with the private sector. I want to say the following, that we have engaged with the private sector players. That conversation was facilitated by the JSE. We're recently at Davos engaging with the major players globally on how best to finance this. Minister Chrissy is leading the IP implementation plan, and the partners there have set aside upwards of $12 billion to be invested in transmission. So, Honorable Graham, I mean, on a serious note, the issue really is not about the financing. It's around putting a bespoke solution that guarantees transparency, a credible governance framework, a plan, and that plan already exists in the form of the ESCOM Transmission Development Plan. So you will see when we go out in the market engaging with the private sector, I'm sure they'll share with us some of their concerns, and we'll do everything to ensure that we correct them and move aggressively to roll out the new transmission. Thanks, Honorable.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The third supplementary question is from the Honorable Mani.
Thank you. I will take it on his behalf. Minister, as a follow-up question to the practical steps that your office needs to take to implement the stated model of private sector develop, build, finance, and operate, can you enlighten us and South Africa, what exactly is this kind of model amongst the popular models of build, own, transfer, or build, own, operate, and transfer models? Minister, this is not giving the National Transmission Company of South Africa to the private players during the term of the loan, even though denying doing it. If it is not either BOT or BTT model, what model exactly is it? Who will have powers to give access to the grid during the term of loan? Minister, the words private sector to develop, build, finance, and operate are far too ambiguous and nothing short of giving the private sector powers to the grid access during the term of the loan. Privatization of the grid. Why are we not privatizing the grid, or NTCSA are indulging and hiding behind sophisticated wording of the same thing?
Thank you very
i.e.
much, Honorable Member.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe just to say the point, you make the point on those options: build, operate, transfer, build, operate, own, transfer. You always forget the T, you just say transfer. So you are accepting that that ownership is going to reside somewhere, which is the NTCSA. So you can't talk of privatization. I'm just saying it's an elementary error of comprehension. So I think it's going to come back to ownership. But also just to state the following, I've made the point that we're engaging with the NTCSA. So what I've just shared with you is a flow of what the options are available, but ultimately it's the NTCSA that will make that decision. But what we agreed on, the both of us, and I think the majority of the House, is that will not relinquish ownership of the grid. The second one is that even if you go the option of operating, the private sector will be responsible for the wires, but the management of the entire grid sits with the system operator. So at all material times, the NTCSA will be responsible for the management of the grid outside the wires. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, may I kindly remind you that as you pose supplementary questions, as you pose supplementary questions, please try to confine yourself to one question. We're still going to the Honorable Sengwa.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Can I take the question? Honorable Minister, your job is not over. There's one more question, but I suppose you can take it from there.
Through you, Chair.
Just like I said, Honorable Singh, Honorable Manye.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, just on the remark that you've just made, I just want to just check our understanding if it's the same, because sometimes the original question has got two parts. Now, when you do a follow-up question on a question that has got two parts, it sounds like you're asking a second question, when in fact, you're still addressing the one question which had two parts. So I wanted to sensitize the Chair to be sensitive to questions that have got A and B or 1 and 2. So that when we do a follow-up question, it must be expected that it will also be a follow-up question on the total package. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Manyan. Honorable Sangwa.
Honorable Chair, may I take the question on behalf of Honorable Sangwa? Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, I'm sure that the engagement with the new board of the National Transmission Company of South Africa, known as NTCSA, will be to ensure alignment with government objectives for accelerating grid investment. So the question is, how will the NTCSA's establishment as an independent entity contribute to creating a level playing field between IPPs and ESCOM? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Singh. I think it's a fair question. And I did make the point that we have had an extensive engagement with the NTCSA. And those are some of the prominent questions that requires responding to. So in that engagement, we have agreed on broad principles. And the NTCSA board is retreating. They are going to have that conversation and come back to the minister. I think the point you are making is important, that there must be a degree of alignment from the policymaker and also the SOE. So where we are standing now, I will not be able to give you that absolute answer. But like I said, we will be coming back to the public and also use this platform to account to the House on what are these options so that we are able to introduce certainty in the scheme. So I'm leaving that to the NTCSA because I really don't want to overstep my mark, but we have agreed on the broad principles. And of course, they are the ones who will be making that determination going forward.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Question number 186 has been asked by the Honorable Singh to the Minister of Finance. The Honorable Minister.
Sisabuyela Itala. National Treasury is aware of Itala Limited's challenges and that it has been working with the Prudential Authority of South Africa, Itala's shareholders, and the KwaZulu-Natal provincial government for many years with a view of returning it to profitability. Itala's last exemption, which had been issued by the Prudential Authority with the concurrence of the Minister of Finance, expired in December 2023. In terms of the country's banking regulatory framework, National Treasury and the Minister of Finance do not have direct regulatory powers over any specific financial institution, including Itala. The regulatory responsibility over financial institutions are shared across the regulatory institutions for the financial sector, the main regulators of which are the Prudential Authority, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, the National Credit Regulator, and the Financial Intelligence Center. The Minister of Finance encourages Itala and its shareholders to continue working closely with the regulatory authorities so that it is able to overcome its challenges. National Treasury is committed to developing a framework which fosters a competitive banking landscape that provides critical banking service to key sectors, including small businesses. The Itala Bank regulatory framework, which enables banks of different size to access the market, including cooperative, mutual, and commercial banks, allows small institutions and startups to apply for licensing under frameworks that are appropriate for them. National Treasury has also been working with the South African Reserve Bank to enable non-banks access to national payment system. So there's a paper which has been published, which I invite colleagues to read, published in 2028. Proposals in the policy paper seek to enable facilitating greater access to the payment system without the need to obtain a banking license. Greater access to the payment system allows for cheaper payments to be made to and from small businesses. And it is critical to reducing transaction costs for small businesses. It should be noted that the proposed changes are meant to benefit the financial system as a whole and are in the interest of the regulations of the entire financial system and are not specific to Itala. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The next question is from the Honorable Abraham. Am I right? Right? Oh, Mr. Singh, I'm sorry. Mr. Singh, the first supplementary question.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Minister, I heard your response earlier on Itala Bank, and you've added to that response. And you may wonder why we are so passionate about the continued existence of Itala Bank as a bank in 2024 and beyond. It's because of the history of the bank. It's because of the support that it provided to thousands of business owners, particularly Black, who could not gain access to the big four banks. And even now we struggle to gain access to the big four banks to get loans and things like that. And not only that, Honorable Minister, it is reported that the KwaZulu Development Finance Corporation was created in 1978 by the Chief Minister at that time, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, where the function of the Finance Corporation was to promote African entrepreneurial stratum to service the commercial sector of the KwaZulu economy. And having said that, Honorable Minister, not only the legacy, but the role it has played, can you give the House an assurance that you will do everything in your power, not just to concur with the repayment administrator, because concurring doesn't mean saying yes, it means applying your mind, but do everything in your power to assist the administrators of the Itala Bank to ensure that it becomes a relevant financial institution as we want state banks now in the South African scenario post-2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
I want to turn the question around and say, can the honourable members who have been asking me this question do me a favor? Prevail on Itala to play ball. The current regulatory framework does not allow a provincial bank. That's the regulatory framework. What we have offered to Itala are two options in the meantime. The first one was, can you partner with an existing bank which you can utilize still Itala platform, use that as a platform. Alternatively, you convert Itala into a mutual bank. Therefore, its depositor becomes shareholders or members of that mutual bank. Over time, once you finish that first step, you graduate into a commercial bank. That is, Itala is spending more time in court than in having discussion with us in the room. Can you do us a favor? You, instead of saying, will I do everything in my power, can you help me and help Itala? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Abra.
Thank you so much, House Chair. Honourable Minister, thank you so much for your response, especially the last part of advice that you are giving us, because at this point, the issue of Itala has been taken over by the committee, and hence we have, through the chairperson, written to the minister, and we have also visited Itala Bank. The question I have, Minister, through your chair, is that Itala Bank has not been granted a banking license since 2001 under the Banks Act and has relied on exemptions, as you correctly stated. Considering that the granting of an exemption by the Prudential Authority is meant to serve as a temporary measure to assist qualifying institutions to regularize themselves as financial institutions, what means will the National Treasury employ in conjunction with the Prudential Authority to enable the bank to obtain a banking license?
Thank you,
Chair.
Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
We want to give Itala a license, but there are stages to doing that. Over the years, as you can say, it's more than 20 years, they've been operating on an exemption. And that exemption, the last exemption was given on the July 2022 for 18 months to say, can you regularize yourselves? These are the options of regularizing yourselves. They have not been applying those options at all. So the ball is not on National Treasurer or the minister. The ball is on Itala. Even when they went to court now, when they went to court, the Prudential Authority phoned me and said, can you appeal to the province to appeal to Itala to stop the court action, because if they lose, it's going to be detrimental to them. And they lost. Now, I'm saying honored members here have got to appeal to the Itala leadership to come to the table and cooperate with the administrator. There's no intention, for instance, as we did with the VPS, to pay the depositor their money back. Is to keep the money plugging so that when the Itala is ready, you bring it back to Itala. But let Itala take the following steps, options we've given to them. As soon as they take those options given to them, the matter is closed.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The third supplementary question by the Honorable Sarugay.
Thank you, House Chair. On the 13th of November 2023, last year, Honorable Minister, it was revealed that there were in fact management issues at Itala dealing in how they were complying with relevant legislation, particularly around the handling of clients' short-term and long-term insurance funds and separate ring-fence accounts, as well as failure to submit a report of its financial affairs for 2 years. Now, in light of these struggles, as well as the struggles at the Post Bank and the ANC's commitment to establishing a state-owned bank, what assurances can the minister provide the country that any future state-owned bank will not be destroyed or mismanaged completely? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Minister.
Let me answer the question. The question before me is Itala. Now, there's a distinction between the regulator and the governing body of Itala. My relationship with Itala is a regulatory relationship. We don't manage the affairs of Itala. Itala has got a board which manages the affairs of Itala, and therefore National Treasury and the Prudential Authority do not have that relationship. We are a regulator. Our role ends there. So we will not be talking on the finances of Itala because that function belongs to the governing body of Itala. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Manye. The last supplementary question.
Thank you very much. I will take it, House Chair. Minister, is it the intention of the National Treasurer to incorporate Itala to the umbrella of the State Bank Holding Company? Why will you allow Itala to be put under repayment administrator while knowing very well that it is a state entity and any shortfall in the repayment of the depositors will be footed ultimately by the state, whether provincial or national? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister.
I said earlier on in answering the first question that was posed that Itala operate outside the licensed environment of the Banking Act. Therefore, we can't put it under business rescue or anything of that sort. We've got to apply the conditions referred to under Section 81 to 84 of the Act. That's why we've appointed an administrator. And that administrator is not intending to do anything, is to make sure that the depositors are safeguarded. Secondly, we have got no reason, I've made the point, it is a business of the board of Itala to make the decision as to where it is incorporated, whether it's going to be incorporated into another state bank or not, belongs to that decision, belongs to the board of Itala. I must emphasize this thing. Our role and our relationship to Itala is a regulatory one. We are not involved in the decision-making about its future or anything of that sort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Question number 176 has been asked by the Honorable Maswale to the Minister of Finance. The Honorable Minister.
Sectors that are likely to drive growth in 2024 include agriculture, forestry and fishing, finance, real estate and business services, as well as trade and hospitality. The construction industry is also expected to grow in the year, supported by developments in transport, energy, industrial and housing projects. While the frequency and intensity of power cuts are expected to decline in 2024, growth in the manufacturing and mining sectors is further expected to remain constrained, at least in the short term, in line with continued power cuts and logistical constraints. Over the medium term, the mining and manufacturing sectors should see improved growth as various network industries reforms and other support measures are implemented. Given that energy and logistics constraints have been the largest challenges for growth, network industry reforms remain a key challenge through which economic growth is unlocked and are instrumental to boosting private investment. Supported by these reforms, gradual improvements in the level and quality of public investment spending will increase coordination and partnerships with the private sector. As underspending declines, public sector capital programs will approach full efficiency. The additional capital expenditure supports the scaling up of projects, leading to increased availability and reliability of infrastructure. These changes encourage private investment and boost exports. To accelerate GDP growth, South Africa needs large-scale private and to achieve this, structural reforms are being implemented in the energy and logistics sector, along with measures to improve state capacity. Furthermore, these reforms and improvements in state capacity are supported by a stable macroeconomic framework that maintains low and stable inflation via inflation targeting and fiscal strategy that stabilize the public finances to reduce long-term borrowing costs. The combination of structural reforms, improved state capacity, and stable macroeconomic framework will catalyze increased investments, supporting faster economic growth and job creation. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable Maswala.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, and thank you, Minister, for a very comprehensive response. Certainly, Minister, these growth areas are not just thought out in government, they are shared, and the assumption is that they are widely supported, including by partners at NEDLEC. Would you, Minister, at this point, what would be your sense of participation as well as commitment in investing in these identified sectors? Among the suite of interventions, would, for instance, consideration of prescribed assets as an example to ensure investment in these sectors be one of the considerations that could be made in future? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
Of course, for growth to succeed, you require for a coordinated effort between all stakeholders in society, including labor and business. And I think NADLEC was created as an important instrument to achieve that objective. In addition, as Dr. Ramkopa has mentioned, in the energy sector, there's also NICOM. In the logistics sector, there's some work with the private sector as well to coordinate that work. Prescribed assets are always an option, provided we can identify what those assets are and the private sector is not willing to invest on those assets. You will recall that in the budget, we made mention of the bucket of issues, of strategies to deal with infrastructure investment. Among other things, we said we'll be publishing new guidelines, which will be concluded by the end of March, in dealing with PPPs. Part of that is to make sure that we can get the private sector to invest in the infrastructure in government. Dr. Ramkopa has mentioned some of the areas in transmission. He's working with the National Treasury team to do some pilots on the transmission sector. So there's a lot of effort being done to bring in the private sector to participate in the public sector infrastructure. So part of that is to bring in this private sector investment. We may have to, provided we can identify the asset classes in which the private sector is not prepared to invest. For now, the private sector is prepared to invest. We simply don't have the instruments and I must add the pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The second supplementary question by the Honourable Solpe.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Honourable Minister, when President Ramaphosa took office, he promised a series of structural reforms in his New Deal program. You'll recall that. And I'm going to give you just 4 of them. 1 was reforms to promote reindustrialization. 2 was reforms to enable and accelerate small business growth. 3 were reforms for skills development to deal with structural unemployment. And the 4th promise was reforms to promote policy certainty. Can you, as Minister, explain how just a single one of these structural reforms that was promised by the President was actually implemented by this government and resulted in accelerated growth?
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Throughout our discussions, including the State of the Nation address, including the budget, we've made reference to structural reforms as key elements of changing the economy. Among other things, was the President set up an institution between the Presidents and National Treasury called Vulindlela. Its fundamental task has been to look at a number of structural reforms in order to ensure growth. They publish a report quarterly, which unfortunately, I don't know how Honorable Sarupeni misses that report. That report details a number of achievements over the period, and it details what are the outstanding projects for reform, from skills, from logistics to visas, to everything that has been done. All of those things are detailed in that report. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The Honourable Manye.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the question. Minister, noting that in your budget speech, you said absolutely nothing believable about what exactly you do to stimulate the economy. You said nothing about industrialization. You said nothing about saving ArcelorMittal, which is the backbone of our steel production. Could you provide specific and practical examples of the structural reforms the National Treasury plans to implement in these productive sectors to stimulate growth and alleviate constraints? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
I don't know which budget speech the Honourable Member was listening to. For instance, she says we've said nothing about industrialization. One of the important things we said in that speech about industry, we mentioned a specific industry and we went in detail after that about ASAT. We said, for instance, we're providing an incentive for EV, electric vehicles. That's a part of the industrial strategy. The Honourable Member was not listening to that strategy. So that's why I'm saying was probably listening to a different budget speech. We made in detailed presentation about structural reforms and what is happening. He also clearly demonstrated, which the Honourable Member does not read the budget properly. We have also made reference a detailed submission on infrastructure in that speech, and the Honourable Member was not listening, was not reading that speech, he was probably reading a different speech. These are the 3 areas I can just cite, which is made reference to, which are contained in the budget speech and in the budget review.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. And the last supplementary question by the Inkosi Buthelezi. Inkosi Buthelezi.
Chair, may I take the question?
Proceed, Honourable Member.
Honourable Minister, thank you for your response. Are there? It is widely acknowledged that revitalizing South Africa's economy necessitates concerted efforts from both government and business entities, alongside the imperative to simplify regulatory procedures and decrease operational expenses for businesses. Question, therefore, is given the importance of fostering synergies between different sectors of the economy, including interactions between large and small companies, foreign and domestically owned companies, and public and private entities, can the Minister elaborate on the government's approach to incentivizing such collaborations, and how does National Treasury plan to overcome existing silos and promote greater integration and cooperation within the business landscape to achieve these goals? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. The Honorable Minister.
That coordination of business is not a National Treasury function alone. It's a function of the whole of government. For instance, the mining sector, Minister Mantashe meets regularly with the Mineral Council. The President has established a joint coordinating function between business and government. And that coordination is taking place. Recently, when the President was in KZN, he also set up a similar structure in KZN for coordination between the provincial government, the eThekwini municipality, and the private sector in KZN. So those are initiatives which are taking place not only from Treasury, but the whole of government is coordinating that function.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Question number 188 has been asked by the Honorable T.D. George to the Minister of Finance. The Honorable Minister.
Let me start with a disclaimer. The document titled Learn About the National Health Insurance was originally issued by the Government Communication and Information System. During the 2024 budget, the minister stated the following about it, the NHI, and I quote, health is allocated a total of 804 billion over the MTF. These allocations include 11.6 billion to address the 2023 wage agreement, 27.3 billion for infrastructure, and 1.4 billion for the NHI grant over the same period. The allocation for the NHI is a demonstration of the government's commitment to this policy. There remain a range of system strengthening activities that are key enablers of an improved public healthcare system that must be undertaken. Such activities include, among us, build a national health information system and a digital patient records, upgrading health facilities and improving quality of care to ensure that they meet the minimum criteria to be certified and accredited for contracting under the NHI. Strengthening facility and district management in preparation for contracting. Granting semi-autonomous status for central and potential other hospitals, and developing reference prices and provider payment methods for hospitals. Many of these activities are already underway, but require further development before the NHI can be rolled out at scale, close quote. A scenario of the potential cost of a fully implemented NHI are included in the white paper on national health insurance. Any announcement regarding tax changes to fund NHI will be made through the normal budget process by the Minister of Finance. According to Section 77 of the Constitution, only the Minister of Finance can table a money bill which can impose national taxes. No announcement regarding new taxes to fund the NHI were made during the budget 2024. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The first supplementary question from the Honorable Judge.
Thank you, Chairperson. The ANC government has been promising a national health insurance for several years now, and the bill is apparently still lying on the President's desk for signature. It's time for the ANC to come clean on its empty promise on the national health insurance. 1.6 billion rand is available in the budget for the NHI. 28 people are already employed in the upper salary range at an average of more than 1 million rand per annum, and we don't know what they are doing. The conservative cost estimate of NHI ranges between 850 billion and 1 trillion rand. The minister says that lots needs to be done, and herein lies the problem. South African households are battling a cost of living crisis, yet tax was increased in February because the tax brackets were not adjusted for inflation. Government could very easily have cut the tax on fuel, expanded the zero VAT rated food basket, and increased the child grant to the poverty line, yet it does not respond because it doesn't care. Minister, when will the government stop lying to the public about a hopelessly unviable non-starter NHI that it knows will break the backs of hard-working South African taxpayers? Just another empty election promise that doesn't feed the 5 million starving children. or put food on the tables of 81% of households who miss at least one meal a day? Thank you, Chairperson.
Response, Honorable Minister.
I couldn't figure out what the question was from the State of the Nation address. I couldn't figure out what the question was. But if it's based on the original question, which is on the funding of the NHI, the first thing I want to say, the president made it absolutely clear he's going to sign the act. The president made that absolutely clear. Once the president has signed the act, we will work together with the Department of Health on the progressive realization of the objectives set out in the act. The third issue, what the honorable member does not want to say when he talks about the unaffordability of the NHI. What it does not say, on the other hand, the middle class and the rich are subsidized by government to the tune of 34 billion rand. We shouldn't be talking about that 34 billion rand become the starting point and the current health budget. So we will ensure at the appropriate time that the appropriate steps are done to roll out the NHI. Among other things, as I've referred here, is to upgrade the infrastructure to meet those standards that are required. So they will, at the appropriate time, what the honored member wanted me to do, which we don't do, is to say we will tax X, we'll do X. At the appropriate time, we'll look at the various instruments of raising revenue to fund the NHI. But it's definitely going to be funded once the president signs it.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The second supplementary question from the Honorable D. Mabiletsa.
Thank you, House Chair. Honorable Minister, the right to quality health care is a constitutionally enshrined right that all South Africans should benefit from, notwithstanding their socioeconomic status. Every citizen deserves better value from our healthcare spending. What are the economic benefits that South Africa will derive from the implementation of the NHI? Number two, how will the NHI bridge the gap between the difference in the amount spent by one person who has medical aid and another who relies on public health facilities? Thank you.
Honorable Minister, whenever a member poses, Honorable Minister.
The question has got three parts.
Just a second. I was just saying, whenever a member raises two questions, when he should have confined herself or himself to one, the option is on you to decide whether you respond to it or not.
The first sort of issue, a healthy nation is good for the economy. Is good for the economy. Therefore, it's in the interest of this economy to make sure that we improve the quality of health for all South Africans. The second set of issues is that the Constitution requires a progressive realization of the rights enshrined in it. Provided quality health care is a response to that constitutional injunction. Thirdly, that constitutional injunction requires an equitable access to healthcare services. And the NHI provides is an instrument to achieving that objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Manye be the next.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the question. Minister, it seems that the President is waiting very long for that pen, the golden pen, to sign the bill, as he has stated. Regarding the National Treasury's indication of introducing a small tax to support the national health insurance, could you, Minister, provide insights into whether the proposed NHI has been thoroughly costed? And if so, could you share the total estimated cost along with relevant details? Because what we saw on the medium-term expenditure framework seems a gross underestimate. Two, in consideration of funding the proposed NHI, If the minister does not intend to increase taxes, could you elaborate on alternative funding mechanisms? If an increase in taxes is indeed planned, could you provide specifics on which taxes are being considered and the corresponding details of this plan? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Minister.
First, when the budget was presented, the NHI bill was not assented to by the president. Secondly, the budget on health mentioned in the budget speech has got three components. The first one is compensation of employees, which is 11.6 billion rand. The second one is for infrastructure, which is going to upgrade the infrastructure of our health facilities. The third element to it is one that deals with the pilot projects which National Department of Health has been utilizing, and through that grant of 1.4 billion rand. Now, people make reference to a tax for NHI. I've not mentioned that. At no stage have I mentioned that. I mentioned taxes once a year on budget day. Once a year on budget day. I don't go around everywhere mentioning tax. If I'm going to tax anything, you will hear from the next year on the 19th of February. So any clarity on taxation, I'm not going to get now. The last point, I have said in the white paper, there are different scenarios that have been proposed for financing healthcare. Once the act has been assented to by the head of state, the president, we will then work with the Department of Health on those scenarios and give effect and roll the NHI out. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The Honourable E.M. Buthelezi.
Chair, I'll have to change my surname. Thank you very much. May I take the question again? Honourable Minister, in your budget, you announced that you are going to dip into the contingency reserves in the budget. Right? Now, given that billions of rand are already allocated to the healthcare sector, to our public hospitals, and given the fact that there are numerous complaints about poor services being offered at our clinics and hospitals, do you think this is the right time for government to invest more money into something that we are not looking after currently? Or to partner with the private sector to make NHI work and to make universal healthcare work for all South Africans? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
I think your last part of the question is a better option. Your first proposition that we should not invest because some funny clinic in some area, people are not performing well, I don't think is a proper starting point. Not all public health facilities are incompetent and inefficient. There are health services where our people are satisfied with the quality of service they are getting. We must therefore invest in improving our health facilities where necessary, and I must put this point, where necessary, partner with the private sector. Again, in KZN, where you come from, Chief Albert Luthuli Hospital is a case in point, which is a triple P gymnasium, working very well. Where necessary, there's an experiment here in the Western Cape, which is going to come through in Tiger Bay. So those alternative proposals, such as those, are going to be entertained moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Question number 177 has been asked by the Honourable Mohlaule, the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. The Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members. In terms of dealing with debt collection, through our regional offices, which are points of contact, the department continuously engaged license holders to hold them accountable in licensing obligations. Debt reminder letters signed by regional managers sent to licensees through registered mail to their domicilium sitandi ex external. That means house for being summoned and executed upon. It's written, because it's written in Latin, I'm explaining it in English for all of us to understand. And the department continues to make contact and visit last known business addresses to attempt to persuade licenses to settle outstanding amounts. And where the attempts do not yet yield results, the regional management hands over the debtors to legal services at head office for the matter to be dealt with in the office of the state attorney. Let me emphasize this. You will notice that we talk about debt collection. We don't take in the first instance a legal route. What we try to do is to develop relations with our debtors, because our relationship is not short term, it's long term. They are licensees, they must pay the license all the time. So we must have a relationship with them. That is what we do in that first stage. Now, then the state attorney processes is no longer in practice. So we can't refer them to state attorneys. And therefore the department in the process of appointing tracing agents to help trace and recover monies due when the internal process of debt collection have been exhausted. That means that is the next phase. Persuade, then send debt collectors. And following handover of the tracing agents, the department will schedule regular meetings with tracing agents to monitor performance against allocated work and ensure that work is allocated on incremental basis to performing agents. Again, emphasis which agents do their work successfully and give us results. That is where we actually develop long-term relations. As part of management reporting, quarterly revenue reports are generated indicating balances per data and aggregated balances per region. These reports are circulated to management for appraisal and for use to monitor both performing and non-performing debtors. Going forward, the department will ensure that where licensees with outstanding and due amounts applying for new rights or renewal in other provinces, such are not issued or granted until outstanding amounts are settled in full. So your assumption is that you get a license, you don't settle your debt, you will be attracted to get another license. In that case, if you are a bad debtor, we deprive you access to licenses.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Masauna. First supplementary question.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. While the proposed control measures to improve debt collection within a reasonable, acceptable timeframe are welcome, has there ever been any consequent management on employees that impede the department to collect debt on time as recommended by the Auditor General? If not, why not? And if so, what are the relevant details?
Thank you, Member. The Honorable Minister.
Our starting point is not employees, it's the debtors. Because employees don't owe the department nothing. It is debtors who own. That's why we give you this last answer that if you are a bad debtor in another province, you have a license in another province, we don't grant you that license. That means we're monitoring you as a debtor. Employees will be penalized from time to time in terms of transgression of their condition of employment. but it is not the primary task to actually look for mistakes among the employees. It is to encourage employees to do their work, send those letters, visit those debtors, and collect the money. If they are transgressing the conditions of employment, then consequences will follow.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable KJ Malia, the next.
Thank you.
May I proceed, Honorable Malia?
Thank you, House Chairperson. Minister, we've noted the poor performance of the department in managing its credit control and debt collection under the ANC government, with the audit action plans and consequence management not being implemented, monitored, or enforced by you. In fact, the Auditor General highlighted this today in her latest report for the CEF Group: inadequate consequence management, poor quality financial statements, and internal control deficiencies. In light of this lack of basic financial management and fiscal leadership, how do you expect entities such as the African Exploration, Mining and Finance Company and Petro SA to improve their audit outcomes and even deliver their annual reports on time when they are led by incompetent cadres in the National Executive and at the SOEs reporting to you?
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister.
Yeah. I knew that this thing of cadre and incompetence will come to the fore. Last time I described it as being racist, actually. Let me tell you how. It is racist if you see poor performance and you attach that to race. No, wait, don't clap, I'm explaining. Let me explain this. In the last question of cadre deployment, I explained this to you that last time I had a DG who was head matric but was a white male, and that was competence. I'm having a DG today who is an engineer.
Yeah, about everything.
That is deployment, cadre deployment. I think EDA must disabuse itself of this obsession, deal with issues. Now, the question is, if we've given you steps regarding debtors, they have nothing to do with AE, they have nothing to do with SAF, they are debtors in the department, and they apply licenses in the department. You are dragging all the entities into the space for some obvious reasons in your mind. I don't understand it. Now we can as well stand up and sing then and dance. Yeah, let's sing, let's dance then. Take out the entities. Let's deal with the question of debt collections, which is beginning to improve because we've assigned the regional managers and teams to deal with it.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Mfangwa, the third supplementary question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
May proceed.
I may proceed. Okay, thank you, Chair. The honorable member was standing by as in my backup in case I'm struggling with network. Now, Minister, revenue of ESCOM debt collection grew to 158.6 billion, which is a 9.5 increase from the 144.8 billion in September 2002, which was due to the impact of tariff increase for the year 2024 financial year. Now, the tariff increase of 18.65 resulted in an increase in revenue in September 2022 compared to 2023, despite a 5.9 decline in sales volume. It is our view that the income does not come from the efficient debt collection, but rather than from high tariffs that NERSA imposes on the consumers. Can the minister deny or agree on this assertion that we hold, or on this view that we hold, and elaborate on his answer? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Minister.
Honorable Mobile has missed the point. He talks about ESCOM debt. Here, we're talking here about debt for licensing and permits. That's what we're dealing with. So we're talking about apples, it brings pears into the picture. So we can't deal with that issue. Yes, we should have asked that question to Minister Ramokgopa. I'm dealing with debt for licensing and permits in the department, not ESCOM. ESCOM is not my portfolio, Honorable Mayor. Okay. That's for your information, it's not my portfolio. ESCOM is not my portfolio.
Honorable members, thank you very much. The Honorable Zondo.
Honorable Chair, I'll have to take this question again. He's getting married tomorrow. So I'm taking the, Chair, can I take 1.5 minutes to ask the question so we move towards 6 o'clock? Because it's very cold in here and we don't want any more questions. But, let me ask the question. It's very difficult, Honorable Chair and Honorable Minister, for me, who does not serve on this portfolio committee, to ask you a question because one does not know the quantum of debt. I don't know if you are aware of how much the debt is within this 5-year period. And you mentioned that it's debt for people who don't pay for licenses and permits. Is there a system within the department that if they do not pay by a particular period, that those licenses and whatever else is granted get cancelled completely? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister.
The debt is for renewal of licenses annually. It's annual fees. If you don't pay, ultimately withdraw that license. But that is not the starting point. We start by persuading people to pay for their licensing because they have an interest in mining, they have an interest in exploration. And we want to encourage them to do that because the future of the industry is not on canceling licenses, it's encouraging people to use those licenses and actually develop business models that will help us help others deal with mining issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Question number 178 has been asked by the Honorable M.E. Dlamini to the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment Finance. Honorable Minister. Order, honorable members.
Sorry.
Person.
Honorable Minister, could you please take your seat?
Yeah,
Honorable Thing, what's the point of order? Order, honorable members.
May I rise on a point of order and information, Honorable Chair? I don't know, my chronometer says 1 minute past 6. I don't know what yours says. So I think mine is wrong.
Mine also says 6:01, but we'll close the house at 6:05. We still have 4 minutes to go, Honorable Singh. Honorable Minister, you're welcome.
My apologies, honorable members. We seem to be in injury time. Our department is implementing various tools to ensure the transformation of the wildlife sector. In this financial year, we are currently consulting on the National Biodiversity Economy Strategy, which has been revised and developed to optimize biodiversity-based business potential across the terrestrial, freshwater, estuarine, and marine landscapes, and to contribute to economic growth and local beneficiation, job creation, poverty alleviation, and food security while maintaining ecological integrity of the biodiversity resource base for thriving people and nature. Through its revision, the strategy has been broadened to respond to the white paper on conservation and sustainable use of South Africa's biodiversity, while incorporating the outcomes of the National Biodiversity Economy Pakisa and addressing opportunities associated with all ecosystems. This strategy has been completely reconceptualized as a broad strategy to guide the entire biodiversity economy, and it is now framed to provide strategic direction to the sector over the next 10 years, and includes two cross-cutting imperatives that address enhanced biodiversity conservation and a goal on transformation. Consistent with the policy context of the white paper, the strategy is founded on the key pillars of conservation, sustainable use, and beneficiation of biodiversity business value chains and transformation. This requires growth and ensuring the sustainability of the conservation of biodiversity components that can be leveraged for biodiversity-based businesses, as well as driving transformation of the sector.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Lamini with the first supplementary question.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Minister, just a quick one. Is there a necessity to provide a historical marginalized people with skills and training so they can fully benefit from the sector? Potential on wildlife and biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Yes, the department has previously embarked on a process to identify opportunities available within and around protected areas that communities can tap into. We then conducted a skills audit in various communities living adjacent to protected areas, and we found that these communities did lack the necessary skills to capture economic opportunities that might arise. The results of the survey also indicated that trainings relevant to business, entrepreneurial development, and technical skills are required within various value chains. We have already started to offer both accredited and non-accredited training on an annual basis, and so far about 2,000 people have been trained. This commitment also aligns with the strategy that I was speaking about earlier, wherein a commitment was made to provide training to 4,000 SMMEs by the year 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Paulson.
Thank you, House Chair. I'll take it on behalf.
Okay.
Minister, the department had a target of 30% of expenditure.
Wow, Mr. Bryant, I'm sorry. I skipped on the Honorable Bryant. I was nearly guillotined. I'm sorry about that. The Honorable Bryant.
Thank you. Minister, it's been a trend that in the absence of economic opportunities, sorry, what's that?
Honorable Bryant, just go ahead, please.
In the absence of economic opportunities and development projects, many of the unemployed people living close to our national provincial parks across South Africa have resorted to poaching. This has led to a 75% decrease in the rhino population of Kruger National Park over the past 10 years. And with our rhino numbers now dwindling in Kruger, poachers are targeting parks and private reserves in KwaZulu-Natal, leading to 499 rhinos being poached last year across South Africa, which is an increase of 51 rhinos poached, as you would be aware. This is in addition to the poaching of many other animals for food and traditional medicine. What steps is the minister taking to protect any new endowment projects from the rampant poaching that's taking place across the country, and in particular in KZN?
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bryant. Yes, indeed, rhino poaching is a serious scourge. I don't think that it is primarily linked to poverty in protected areas around our national parks. It's really related to organized crime. And I think you are well aware that we have an integrated wildlife trafficking strategy that addresses this through intelligence-driven operations that have been highly successful in catching and prosecuting offenders. I think what we are concerned about in terms of the existence of poverty on the outskirts of our national parks is an increase in what we call bushmeat poaching. And we're particularly concerned about the snaring of many species of animals, many of which would not necessarily be the targets of the snares that are set. One of the things we are currently doing, particularly on the western boundary of Kruger, where this is a huge problem, is that we've increased our foot patrols so that we can search for these animals. We are also responding to tip-offs from our tourists. And this is a matter that is currently under discussion by the Kruger management and also by Sandparks in general, because we recognize that while a lot of our resources have been going into dealing with the rhino poaching scourge, this is a new phenomena that we need to be combating much more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for Ms. Paulson. For the Honorable Paulson, Honorable Member, you are allowed now.
Thank you so much. Minister, the department had a target of 30% of expenditure to companies that are at least 51% owned by women. This target has since been removed. Why was the target not reinstated, and how will the department measure its progress in supporting women-owned businesses without the targets? And will the department ensure that women-owned businesses are not disadvantaged without the targets? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is an important issue. You would be aware that because of a court challenge to the preferential procurement bill, we've had to change the way in which we handle our targets. We now have a departmental strategy that encompasses these targets. In fact, the target in certain categories is not 30%, but it's now 50%. And it includes women, it includes those who are living with conditions of disability, and it also includes youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the last supplementary question from the Honorable Singh.
Thank you very much. Last question again today, as was yesterday. Honorable Minister, we are concerned and people are concerned about the environmental impact of this plan. Many environmental NGOs have expressed their concerns, and my office has also received numerous correspondence regarding this issue. The proposed health clinics offering rhino horn and ivory carving for personal use, we believe will only harm wildlife and stimulate illegal markets. We know, as this has happened before. And we are responsible, and you are responsible for South Africa's fauna and flora, Honorable Minister. How do you plan to fulfill this obligation while still promoting the monetization of our rich wildlife and biodiversity heritage and biodiversity?
Thank you very much, Honorable Singh. The Honorable Minister.
I think what's important is, first of all, to read the strategy. And I think that what you will see has been introduced into this strategy is a relationship between our conservation objectives, our ecosystem protection objectives, and our transformation objectives. If you look at previous economic strategies, there was not that linkage between economic objectives and environmental objectives. If there are certain specifics in the strategy which you feel are inappropriate, you still have an opportunity to comment on the strategy. I have extended the comment period by another 2 weeks because NGOs have indicated they didn't feel there was enough time. And we do have the Indaba next week, which is intended to be a conversation on this strategy, and we welcome inputs that will improve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, the time allocated for questions has expired. Outstanding replies received will be printed and answered. Order. I request members to stand and wait for the chair and the maids to leave the chamber. That concludes the business for the day and the House is adjourned.